Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. This video is about why the people who are persecuting me are anti-Semitic. And they're almost certainly, the main people doing it must be whites and Jews and LGBT people, certain types of them. Now bear with me. If a Jewish person noticed that there was a Palestinian who walked into Israel and he nuked all of Israel to get that one Palestinian person, would that action be anti-Semitic? The person said, well, he loves the Jewish people so much that he hates that particular Palestinian person, and so he nuked the whole country at face value. Should they celebrate, no matter how racist they are, should they be like, hey, that's a great idea? That's a stupid idea, right? It doesn't make sense. And the person should be executed for it, or something to that effect, right? Now, so it is with the Messiah. One of the most explored stories in human history is the Bible. And it tells Jews why not to persecute the Messiah, whether they're Christian or not, whether they believe in Christianity or not, whether they believe an actual Messiah is coming or not. Because it passes the agnostic test as well. When all the smartest people in human history, not people who are just book smart, but life smart, who are analytical, wise, insightful, who have sense, agree that it is a stupid idea to persecute the most righteous person ever possible, and it's outrageously retarded, and it has effects that are hard to quantify, that go beyond nuking all of your people kind of thing. And the person who says, hey, let's persecute this guy for kicks or something, or for a mere ritual, in the spirit of a group that is all playing its part like on a stage, right? The theater of war, like on a stage. They're all there. Good cop, bad cop psychology. Good Jew, bad Jew psychology. And they persecute the most righteous person ever in the Jewish spirit, making sure that every Jew is either in the psychology of the quote-unquote good Jew and the psychology of the quote-unquote bad Jew. Thus part of the greater spirit of the Jewish people. Thus the spirit that's persecuting the most righteous person ever lived. Thus bringing upon themselves extreme punishment for the frivolous philosophical theories of the most deranged of the Jews. People like Anton LaVey and idiots like that, the Marquis de Sade. Don't you think that those people who are persecuting me should be hung upside down and flogged to death or something? Because of the extreme damage they're causing to their people for no good reason whatsoever. So how does gang stalking prove my point? Well, when you look at my case, right, I was right about so many things. I was right about my parents' companies and how they should have shut them down years ago and saved hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was right about what society should do about homelessness. I was right about the law enforcement plan, the farming plan. Came my top martial arts challenge, I called that. I was right about my parents needing to budget. I have 23 witnesses on record. I graduated college while I was being sabotaged, and some of those witnesses were witnesses to me being sabotaged while I'm in college, while I'm making videos, while I also had my top martial arts challenge all going at the same time. And I'm looking for females, they're getting shunned, they're getting angry. I'm being filmed and covertly poisoned. They're trying to put me on psych meds and all this stuff. And so you could see that I was very rational. I moved more massively than anyone in human history. No one in the history of humanity has made a challenge of any sort that's comparable to my top martial arts challenge, much less doing that through sabotage while going to college and graduating, while making videos where I did tons of research on top of the research I did to graduate college. I mean, other people are way outclassed. Yet, if I tried to apply to Harvard or Brown, anybody even right now, they would almost certainly reject me, even though I have a college degree already. Okay, now why is that? Because society does not think about things in terms of skill sets and forms of intelligence. College does not care about, people, the college administrations and society, the parts of society that agree with them, they do not care about existential intelligence or spatial intelligence or interpersonal or intrapersonal intelligence or logical, mathematical, outside the kind of narrow-minded view of the people who designed the college curriculums. It's pretty straightforward. So when you don't consider people's skill sets and how they can contribute, and you design society for a bunch of fixating nerds, right? Nerds are boringly studious. Why? Because they have a variation of obsessive compulsive disorder, right? They're obsessed with something. They want to get their PhD and they go into this and they go into that. And they don't care what kind of monsters are running society and how their work is used. They just want to, drink the Kool-Aid that tells them that they should keep going along the path that the psychopathic governing classes laid before them. And when they did studies, their own psychologists found that 1 in 5 CEOs are psychopaths. And then there's narcissists and sociopaths and people with OCD and so on and so forth. Perverts and all kinds of unsavory characters. Or should I say all kinds of other unsavory characters. So when we look at the economy, we see that there's lots of people who die from preventable deaths. They're suffering. They're turning to cigarettes, and cigarette smoking is killing like 500,000 people a year. We're seeing this massacre take place, and it goes back to skill sets. That's why the mark of the beast, right, has to do with talents, right? The 666 talent gold tax of King Solomon, right? The mark of the beast, talents. What are your skill sets? What are you good at? What way do you learn? How do you learn things? If you think about Zulus, for example, they spend a lot of time doing a lot of physical exercise, learning in a way that's very stimulating, very martial art-like, very warrior-like. And a lot of cultures didn't. Scribes and craftsmen, they didn't. The school system is designed for scribes and craftsmen. And then they take the women that would, to some degree, otherwise go to people who are more physically fit, more interesting, more sharp than they are, right? That's why the word sharp is like, a sharp sword or something. That's why it's called penetrating intelligence and piercing intelligence. So we see that these people have deceived the masses. And quite often, a lot of people who are the offspring of warriors, they end up joining gangs, they get killed, they go to prison, and they get crippled, and so on and so forth. And we see people turn into drugs because they don't quite understand why they're doing bad in life. Or maybe they do understand, and it leads you to the same place, being sad. And they want you to disassociate in place too. But again, who disassociates more easily than others? People who are the offspring of scribes and people who are artistic and stuff like this, who fixate on things. They fixate. Think about Einstein, right? And his hair all over the place. Why? Because he's fixating on things. Is he the smartest person ever lived? No. No one with any sense would say that even for a moment. Now, maybe if you're talking about scientists, but that doesn't quite add up either. That's a story for another day. Neither is Tesla. Because science is more than just, I have a theory, and it turned out to be true to some degree as far as we know. Science also has to do with a profound understanding of life that famous scientists basically never have. That's a story for another day. The bottom line, when we're talking about skill sets, believe it or not, the word set goes back to set as a deity. And the word skills has the word kills in it for a reason. Skill set, kill set. So if you're really skilled, you do not want to be some kind of brute force idiot, some kind of magic card, worm, some kind of geek, right? If you're wise, if you're smart, if you're skilled at life, do you want to be a nerd, which is defined by nerds as foolish and contemptible, boringly studious and worthless? No. The wise person doesn't end up allowing himself to be those things. And this is part of why so many people do bad in school, because it's for nerds by nerds, especially nerds with fancy crests from England and Germany and France who try to pretend they're superior to other people, who other nerds usually outsmart. Then there's Asian nerds and other nerds who come from other countries and show them up. But because they're so fixated on that system and they're so determined to try to look good relative to being some kind of rich nerd. Look at Elon Musk, right? Narcissistic characteristics, right? Look at Bezos as he tries to be a nerd. And Bill Gates, right? They're like geeking narcissists, right? That's why it's called geeking, right? G king, G being the earth deity, worldly. They don't transcend a basic, primitive, fixating animal state. What do animals do? They fixate. What do animals do? They fixate. What do animals do? They fixate. What's the difference between being an animal and having your humanity intact? Well, if you're really a human being to the fullest sense of the word, no offense to anybody, to the fullest meaning of the word, you have your humanity intact. You're concerned with doing things that are humane, that are moral. The word moral is scrambled into the word normal. So if you're a normal human being, you're a moral person with their humanity intact. But yet society's designed to screen them out. We hear the good guys finish last. Okay, what was it? Benjamin Franklin said alcoholism takes the wisest and the best of every generation. Why is this? Because society is designed around psychotic and narcissistic nerds' skill sets and the cowardly nerds who obey them and they try to elevate them. Then there's these arrogant people from old money families. Some are nerds, they're approaching nerds, or they're nerds basically. They're not warriors, not to the truest sense of the word, because they don't have a sound moral code. They just take, because they're focused on things that people who never quite evolved to be fully human are focused on. And I'm not saying this relative to race, okay? It doesn't matter if you look more like an animal than everyone else, or you look more like a lemming from the video games Lemmings than everyone else. It matters if you have your humanity intact to the point where you transcend being an animal. And we see that the system is designed to screen out those who transcend. Thus, the Bible is about the process of screening out people who transcend. You don't believe me? Read Isaiah 57. The righteous perish and no one takes it to heart. The devout, the word devout is like the word devour, are taken away, and no one understands that the righteous are taken away to be spared from evil. Those who walk uprightly enter into peace. They find rest as they lie in death. So who's the system designed to accommodate? A Judeo-Christian system, right? Isaiah 57 is part of the Jewish book, right? The Old Testament, the Torah, the Tanakh, and how they make up the Old Testament. And there's some differences there in translation, but they're not that significant, not in terms of, not relative to this point I'm making right now. But you come here, you children of a sorceress, you offspring of adulterers and prostitutes. Who are you mocking? And whom do you sneer and stick out your tongue? Are you not a brood of rebels, the offspring of liars? So we see these Jews, they're scribes, they're rabbis, they're inventors, they're scientists, they're teachers, and so on and so forth. They own companies, they're bankers, they're stockbrokers. Now, how are they described, right? The culture kind of revolves around them, Judeo-Christian, them and the white people like them and the token minorities like them and so on and so forth, right? So how are they described in the book? They say if the righteous are taken away, who is this system being designed for? Right? The children of a sorceress. Now it talks about people talk about being a math wizard, right? Math wizard, witten, to know, right? A common root term. So it describes them as the children of a sorceress and the offspring of adulterers and prostitutes. Now, I'm not aiming this at the Jews. If any Jewish ladies and gentlemen feel like they're being targeted by this video unfairly or that it's racist, please put in the comments. We can discuss this. What I'm saying is almost every single last person has been bred, whether they're Jew or otherwise, to be the offspring of adulterers, right? People who prostitute themselves to other ideas, right? And sorceresses, right? People who deal in psychology and chemistry and confusion and propaganda and theater arts and ritual madness. And prostitutes, people who prostitute themselves to other ideas, people who are gold diggers, right? And social norm fanatics, people who date people based on social acceptance instead of carrying their cross for what is right, so to speak. Okay? And it's reflected in the school system and how they're looking for certain skill sets while ignoring higher forms of intelligence, more beneficial forms of intelligence. That's why governments are so corrupt that anarchists make arguments that there shouldn't be governments in the first place, which I don't agree with, mind you, but they're so corrupt that that's like the basis of that philosophy and those arguments. Okay? Because these people are the offspring of craftsmen, nerds, sorceresses, adulterers, prostitutes, right? And they're mockers. That's why in verse 4 it says, who are you mocking? And whom do you sneer and stick out your tongue? Are you not a brood of rebels, the offspring of liars? The offspring of what? Of liars. So when they're claiming by their actions and their degrees that they're smarter than everyone else, they are lying. And they're using the wrong scale. That's what it means to be an adulterer. They're using the wrong scale for talents. Thus, the mark of the beast, 666, the talent gold tax of King Solomon, 666 talent gold tax. And the 666 is also said to be the mark of humanity or a human or humanity's number. The main application of it is the mark is humanity's number. The numbers that they're using for their scale, for their measures, for their boundaries, for their, like it says in the book of Isaiah, not too far away from that chapter. In fact, maybe it's 45 or so. It says that there's an outline that the craftsman is using when he makes an idol. So it's like the barriers, it's the blueprint, it's the formula, form, formula, formation, form and for. What for? So they're creating a society for mockers, for liars, and they thus created lots of poverty and suffering. And they refuse to have logical and effective and solid, firm, robust social programs that are cost effective, that address the problem, because they are some kind of monsters. They're mocking justice. It says, "At whom do you sneer? Stick out your tongue." They're sticking out their tongues, figuratively speaking, at the homeless. And you see these people, right? These rock and roll people, these occultists, these TikTok people on YouTube, what have you. You see these people stick out their tongue. It has implications on prostitution and sneering and sticking out your tongue at God and the righteous. It goes on to say that you burn with lust among the oaks and under every spreading tree, among the smooth stones of the ravines are your portion. Indeed, they are your lot. Yes, to them you have poured out drink offerings and offered grain offerings. In view of all this should I relent? You have made your bed on a high and lofty hill. There you went up to offer your sacrifices. So they're sacrificing their time and they're leading their children in a certain way. They're sacrificing their humanity and their sanity and their intelligence to commit to these psychotic paths of people who refuse to transcend and be moral transcendence, morally precise transcendence. And thus they're forging the image of their false idols, of the things whose talents that they're trying to replicate, that they're trying to reproduce, right? Production, right? Corporate production and reproduction. They're trying to reproduce and express and breed the images, the living images of these idols that do not have the breath of God in them. Thus they're said to be lifeless. Thus they're said to be empty and stupid and pointless. And it goes on to say that they descended to the very realm of the dead as they kept, emphasizing their skill sets. Keep in mind, people have the option to restructure the school system to have a much more fair economy. People like them can make lots of money still in the new model, and the overall society would be more productive. There would be lower rates of substance abuse and unemployment. It would be much better for everyone.